In 2024, a meta-analysis of around 71,000 athletes found that Australia had the highest percentage of self-reported disordered eating amongst athletes.
It's a very isolating feeling and experience when you're dealing with an eating disorder. It makes you feel like you can't tell anyone.
Eating disorders are not just because of vanity or wanting to look skinny, which is a very old stigma, and 45% of female athletes experience an eating disorder.
I remember I went into a shop with my mum and I started trying on all these bathers, and I ended up actually crying in the store because I didn't want to do it anymore.
Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell Chelsea, who was in that change room and crying about the way that she looked?
Unfortunately,
welcome to 4TG. In 2024, a meta-analysis of around 71,000 athletes found that Australia had the highest percentage of self-reported disordered eating amongst athletes globally. Now, that is not a niche statistic, with 57.1% identifying as having disordered eating. Whilst it's not a niche statistic, it is a national conversation that is not happening nearly enough. And today I'm bringing in Chelsea Blissett, a female football athlete who has experienced it herself. And we're going to look at it from the female athlete's lens and how prominent it is and what we can start doing to spread the conversation and to create awareness around it. Chelsea is a defender for the Melbourne Victory A-League's women. She is a two-time ACL survivor, as well as many other injuries, which I'm sure we will get into. And she's also the founder of performance sportswear brand Style Tracker. Chelsea has spoken openly about her battle with an eating disorder while playing elite football, and she's here to tell us all exactly what it looks like and feels like from the inside. So, Chelsea, welcome to the 4TG podcast.
hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Very excited to have you. And as we're just chatting about, it's been a little bit of a while in the making, but
Yes.
I'm really, really keen because, as we've said, such an important topic in sport and outside of sport now, but it really isn't getting the limelight it deserves. So you have been very vocal about this on your own social media.
Yes.
And you do it in such an elegant and eloquent way. And I've been loving following your journey. So yeah, I think the listeners will get a lot of value out of this one.
Oh, no, thank you. I really appreciate that. I try my best to kind of speak about it in a respectful way because I think everyone's journey is quite different with how they experience eating disorders, how they recover, how they've gotten help, how they reach out. And sometimes I get a little bit of like imposter syndrome in a way, like posting about it and thinking like, oh my gosh, no one cares. It's like, I don't know why I'm doing this. But at the end of the day, I think it's when you understand that you're reaching a bigger audience, not only just girls who do play professional sport, but it's these younger girls coming through that are starting to experience these thoughts and these feelings. And because it is new, they might not understand where they're coming from. And hopefully my platform is able to show them and share with them, you know, that it's okay. Like, yes, these feelings might not be normal, but they're not irregular among, you know, normal female athletes or young girls. And it's like, how do you deal with it and how do you combat that and how do you reach out and get help? So that's what I aim to do. That's what I'd like to try and think that I do on my social media platform.
Well, I think that you're definitely doing it. And social media is a blessing and a curse. It's a curse in that, especially in the, disordered eating space, I think 1 in 3 girls have changed their eating habits because of what they've seen on social media. But you can also use it to your benefit and use the power in it, which you're doing, and sort of rewriting that narrative. So yeah, it's great work, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your journey, and I hope that some of the listeners can often relate, and hopefully we can prevent them from having to go through the same experiences that you've had to go through.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. I think that's one of the biggest things that my goal is just to work on prevention and opening up the conversation, especially around eating disorders and not making it so taboo. Like, I remember when I was first starting to talk about my eating disorder with my parents and talking to them about kind of I was feeling inside, there was such a stigma around what was actually happening and what they thought that it was that I was experiencing. I think that's a major thing that I found. It's people are always going to assume they know what you're experiencing when it comes to an eating disorder. I think it's amazing that we're talking so much about mental health and the impacts of anxiety and depression when it comes to even just, people in sport every day, like how that affects us. But I also still think that when it comes to eating disorders, there's now still this preemptive stigma of if you experience an eating disorder, this is what you must be like, or this is why that must have happened, when there's so many different factors to why someone will develop an eating disorder or how it develops, or whether or not someone is, bulimic or anorexic. Like there's so many things that contribute to eating disorders. And I just am trying to pull away from that stigmatized conversation of, I think the one thing that really gets to me is that it comes across as like a vanity thing, or people with eating disorders only care about the way that they look and, that they have a choice in the matter, which is not true at all. And that's what I try to destigmatize when it comes to my own platform.
And we had this chat with Alicia Edge actually, who's the Matilda's dietitian.
Yes, and she's actually my dietitian. I love Alicia. Yes, I love
she's
Alicia.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But I love what she said in that eating disorders don't have a look. Like we stereotypically think it's a white, skinny female and they're anorexic. That's an eating disorder. But eating disorders come in all different shapes, forms, sizes, genders. Like it's also massive in the men's space, and it probably isn't spoken about as much in the men's space.
No, it's definitely not.
So yeah, both genders definitely have a long way to go. But before we get into the crux of that, I'm going to put you to your soccer skills or football skills. Sorry, that's a bit of a controversial one in and of itself. I'll try and remember football. But let's kick off with a 4TG penalty shootout and set the scene. So very similar environment and atmosphere to the 2023 World Cup, similar stakes involved. I'll give you 3 questions, no time to think about it, but there's no such thing as a wrong answer. You ready to roll?
Yes, let's do it.
Brilliant. What is one interest that you have that not many people know of?
I am a romance reader. I have my Kindle and I am obsessed with going to bookshops. It's my favorite thing.
Favorite author?
Oh, Carly Fortuna at the moment. She's got some really, really good romance novels that I've been obsessed with lately.
Okay, I'll have to delve into that. I'm a bit of a Jane Austen fan, a little bit of an older romantic, but still, same premise.
Same premise.
All right, next one. If you could go back and unlearn one self-limiting belief that you grew up with, what would it be?
I think it would be my attitude around my confidence and like not being good enough, and like my ability within being able to do things. I think sometimes that is a very big self-limiting belief that I have about myself, and I think that I would definitely go back and unlearn that.
I think many of us can relate to that one as well, being females. And finally, footballer, founder, or advocate. You have to choose one to be remembered by. Which one are you choosing? Why?
I think advocate, because I think that, yes, do I love what I do on the football pitch every day? And I love the business that I run. I think it's very important. And I think both things are a big part of who I am. But I think advocating for something that's bigger than I am is probably what I want to be remembered for the most. And I feel like it's the one thing that is like the biggest part of me and has shaped who I am as a person. And so that if I can help more people from that, I think that's probably what I would rather be remembered by.
I like that. Football sort of gives you the platform.
Yeah.
Being a founder gives you the purpose, but yeah, being an advocate gives you the legacy. So that's pretty cool. And I'm sure you are building that every day, which is awesome to see.
Yes, fingers crossed.
So before we get into talking about eating disorders, I want to know a little bit more about you. So for the listeners who don't know you, give us a rundown of who you were growing up, what the role sport had in your childhood, and a little bit of a background as to where you've been, because you've sort of traveled a little bit around with football by the looks of things.
Yes, so I am actually an Albury girl. I grew up on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. I played every sport growing up, like every sport. I was really big into athletics growing up, and then I decided that we could finally play sort of sport at school in I think it's like year 3, and I didn't want to play netball and I didn't want to play softball, so the only other sport was soccer, and my dad played soccer when I was growing up. So I just decided that I would play, and then I quite enjoyed it. So then I went and started playing at a local club, and I probably was playing for, I would say, enjoyment up until I was like 10, 11. And then my parents kind of realized, like, oh, she's actually kind of good at it now. Like, I was starting to kind of develop a lot more because I was playing with boys all the time because we didn't have a girls' league until you're like 14. So I just was doing that alongside athletics. I was a 400-meter runner. And when I then got to sort of 13, 14, I made my first state team and was like, actually, I think that I like football a lot more. So I'm going to give up athletics and I'm just going to focus on football pretty much full time. So there was a lot of traveling when you're from the country for football. So you got country camps and school holidays. You're always going to a center of excellence center on a Friday night. And yeah, I just fell in love with the sport. I then, when I was 16, moved to Sydney to go to a sports high school because I wanted to further my career, and there was just no opportunity in Albury. So I moved away from home, like without my parents. I moved into a host family's house and I just was sort of pursuing soccer. I would say around a year, 13 months into living away from home, I started to develop quite bad anxiety, just to the point where I started experiencing panic attacks for the first time and not kind of being able to cope with things properly. I think that it was a lot of the stress of feeling like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. I had a lot of friends that started to make teams that I wanted to make, or get told that they, were gonna go away on certain camps. And I did have, at that point, I had someone tell me that I probably wasn't going to be good enough to make it, which was really like heartbreaking at the time. And I think that kind of exacerbated a lot of the feelings that I had. I always remember being an anxious child. And upon reflection, I also always remember being a body conscious child. I was very self aware of the way that I looked. I was very self aware of my body at quite a young age. But I kind of just never had anything that I feel like maybe like triggered that part of me until I kind of developed anxiety and felt like a lot of lack of control. Then I started to develop my eating disorder throughout that year. That's kind of like second year that I was in Sydney. And when I ended up having to face the fact that I was suffering from an eating disorder, I then kind of spoke to my parents about it. And that was like an honestly very hard conversation to have with them about, I was living away from home. I had their trust, and in a sense, I did break their trust. I wasn't honest with them. I was, in a way, I'm hurting myself. I'm not doing, I wouldn't say the right thing. That's not like the right term, because obviously what's happening to you is not in your control. But the lack of transparency and honesty, I think, is what really hurt them and broke them a little bit too. And I then moved home for a little bit, during a school holiday period. And as a family, we discussed what was going to happen in my mind. I actually was ready to throw in the towel. I was like, my mental health is more important. I really want to get help. I want to, move forward with my life in a positive way. And at that time, I didn't feel like football served me that well, just because I felt quite beaten down. I felt that maybe it wasn't for me, maybe I wasn't good enough. And I remember I was sitting talking to my parents, and they both had said to me that they don't think that I should give up on my dream just yet. If they think that I can do it, like they think that I can do it, I need to believe in myself, that they'll be with me through whatever I need in the recovery process, and that I shouldn't give up on my dreams just yet. Which was when I look back, is such a pivotal moment in my life. Like, it's a very pivotal moment in my life, because if it wasn't for that moment, I wouldn't have decided to go and trial for a team in Melbourne and decide to get help in Melbourne, see an eating disorder psychologist in Melbourne. And I wouldn't have then been able to set myself on the path that was going to lead me to be able to trial at Melbourne City, because they still believed in me. They were willing for all of us to put the work in, so I could earn that trust back, so I could still live on my own with like a host family, go to school, graduate year 12, get better, do the steps, do the work. We did a lot of we did a lot of family therapy, which was really helpful, because by doing that family therapy, they were able to understand the eating disorder as I was understanding it. So then it became almost like a collaborative approach to my recovery, which was so helpful because in a way they were able to fill in the gaps that I couldn't, because when I wasn't feeling the best, or when I would start to have these feelings again, because they were doing the work with me, the understanding, they were able to almost like read my mind and allow me to sort of express my feelings without judgment, because they were just as understanding as my psychologist was, because we were all doing it together. And so in year 12, I got a scholarship to an all-girls grammar school here in Melbourne. So I had every intent at that point. I was playing senior football at South Melbourne. I was going to graduate year 12. I was going to get into the uni that I wanted to. I was going to then take a gap year, move home, and then move back to Melbourne. And then right at the end of year 12, I was asked to trial at Melbourne City, which was one of like the biggest clubs here in Australia, especially when it comes to women's football. And I trialed for around 2 or 3 months. And the week before the season started, I received my first ever professional contract. So from 18 months, a year and a half before that, sitting on a bench in front of the local GP centre at a cafe, talking to my parents about quitting football and feeling like football's not for me. A year and a half later, I was stepping on the field out at Canberra and making my A-League debut. So it was quite a journey to get there, but I think it makes it kind of just as rewarding. But I am also owe so much to my parents for kind of believing in me and seeing that eating disorder didn't define me, or they weren't going to allow it to take away my life. So I was very lucky. So that was kind of my journey into professional football and kind of how I came to kind of be where I am today. Now, I think this year was like my 6th or 7th year in the league. So it's crazy. But yeah, that's kind of my journey a little bit into sport.
Wow, what a story. And
Yeah.
your parents sound absolutely incredible, because
Yeah.
a lot of parents, as you say, like you'd feel almost this guilt and you want to hide these things. But the fact that they were open enough to not only go to therapy with you and take the initiative to understand it better, but also to tell you to not give up on your dreams and to keep pushing you that, go after it. Just that belief must have been such a relief for you, and, ultimately is why you're here today. So it proves just how important your environment is. And I guess not having to hide it, it must have been, really liberating for you, and you were able to start understanding it and dealing with it and moving through it.
Yeah, it definitely was a sigh of relief. I think it is. It's that guilt that you feel, and it's that isolation that it puts onto you. So it's a very isolating feeling and experience when you're dealing with an eating disorder. It makes you feel like that you can't tell anyone, that no one's going to understand you, that it's the only thing that's actually improving your life or keeping you where you want to be. So it isolates you away from the people that matter to you most. And I think it's a little bit hard then when you want to speak about it, because you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know how people feel about it. It doesn't become a safe environment where your eating sort of takes you away, isolates you, and lulls you into a false sense of like safety and security, when that's not the case at all. And yes, it obviously is not an easy thing to hear as a parent or as anyone that, loves someone and sees someone struggling with an eating disorder, or doesn't quite know how to understand what is happening. But I think the overarching takeaway that I like to say to people is sometimes you don't have to know what to say. You don't have to know how to feel. All you have to do is just be there with someone to make them feel comfortable enough to take that first step forward into recovery, and then you can go from there.
Mm. And a really important point that you mentioned that I want to focus on too is that eating disorders are not just because of vanity or wanting to look skinny,
No.
which is a very old stigma. And 45% of female athletes experience an eating disorder. And a lot of that is because they're extremely competitive. They often have perfectionist tendencies, and they think that they want to perform better, and a way to do that is to lose weight. So it's not just wanting to look good, it's wanting to perform good and have a lot of external pressures, which by the sounds of you, you were moving around a lot when you were young. And I'm sure a lot of that anxiety probably was a bit of a catalyst to this. So when did you start realizing that you had an eating disorder or something wasn't quite right? Was there kind of this defining moment for you?
Yeah, there was. I think for me, the first moment where I actually look back and go, I could tell that there was something quite wrong. And this is like kind of something, if it's such an isolated incident, you would probably never think about it twice. But I think that with everything that catalyst after that, I was 15. I was on a holiday with my parents, and at the time we didn't have a lot of like cool surf shops or big like bikini brands back home, and all I wanted was a pair of these branded swimmers, and I could get that when I was in the Gold Coast with my family. And I remember I went into a shop with my mum and I started trying on all these bathers, and I ended up actually crying in the store because I didn't want to do it anymore. And it was because I didn't want to stand there and look at my body, and I did not like the way that I look. I didn't like the way that I felt. And yes, I guess that can come across like that kind of stigma, that view of like that vanity. But it was that kind of feeling of I just was so hyper aware of how I felt in my body, how I looked, like the lack of control I almost weirdly felt, that it it just led me to not want to do it anymore. I didn't want to do it. I remember my mum and I got in an argument because she goes, "You look great in all these." And I just said, "I don't want to do it anymore. This isn't for me. I don't want to buy anything." Done. And then from there, that's when I probably started to feel it a little bit more, that kind of over criticalization of myself and that perfectionistic tendency, as I probably would say what it was. It was that I needed to be the best. And because I feel like when I moved away from home and that I was kind of pursuing something that people had kind of told me that it was crazy to want to do, I just wanted to be the best. And then I just felt this complete sense of control loss, like a complete lack of control. And that's where I think my eating disorder stems from, is that I become a very anxious person. And then when I become anxious, I feel like I lose control of not only my mind, but my surroundings and the things around me. So the one thing that I can control is my food and my performance and how I look and how I train, and how I be meticulous in the everyday things in my life. That for me is how that stemmed. And I had bulimia for, I'd probably say, 2 years before I got help. And I knew that something wasn't right. I did understand that the what I was doing every day, by being stuck in a binging and purging cycle, was not okay. However, I didn't know how to speak up. I didn't know the name for it. I didn't understand what was happening to me. And I just remember one day, um, going through something and then just understanding, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not right. I need to change. I need to stop. So then when I felt that need, it then kind of, I tried to do it by myself. And then I ended up becoming anorexic and not eating at all because I tried to stop by myself and I didn't know how to do that. So that was my biggest realization of being, oh, okay, no, something's not right. I do have a problem here. But unfortunately, I was in that space of not knowing what to say, not understanding what was happening to me, and not even knowing where to start when it comes to speaking out.
Mm. And what sort of physical repercussions did it have on your performance and just your day-to-day life?
For performance, for me, it was because I was around 16 or 17 at the time. I had a lot of like kind of sort of loss of circulation. My hands were all black blue. I was always ridiculously cold. I, had no kind of color in my face. I was very gaunt. I every time I stood up, I'd be dizzy. I'd fall over. I couldn't stand really for long periods of time. I got tired and fatigued really easily. But I think the crazy thing about our body is then I could go out and play a 90-minute game.
Mm.
So it had repercussions on my body for a while, but it's crazy what your body can do under those kind of stressful circumstances. Do not recommend doing it, but I think that's why I was able to get away with it for so long as well.
Mm. And were you scared to tell your club because you're already fearful that, you didn't feel like you're good enough to be there, and if they knew that they would cut you?
Well, no, not really. I think so I've been very blessed. Every club that I've ever been at has been super supportive and super helpful. South Melbourne was so supportive when I finally reached out and got help and started getting help and understood that I'd actually need to take 2 to 3 months off of football, um, so I could get help to get cleared then to play again. They supported me 100%, and I was able to go back when I was ready. Even when I went to Melbourne City, and I had initially not overly been too open about it, but when I was open about it in the end, all I was met with was love and support and, just people going, yes, we might not understand what you're going through, but the support's here. These are our support networks. If you never need anything, let us know. I think I understand that not everyone is blessed in that circumstance. I've been blessed with some amazing coaches in my life that have, believed in me and haven't seen that as a negative in me. But I do understand that not every circumstance and situation is the same when it comes to clubs and coaches and high expectations.
Mm. Well, that's so comforting to hear because
Yeah.
obviously we only generally hear the horror stories, like a couple of weeks ago, that male coach yelling at his female team that, that knew to lose weight and that they're our breeders and all these horrific things like that. So to hear that, you had such good support from the system speaks volumes. And I think there's another stat that I read that 91% of college coaches or something coach athletes with an eating disorder, but only 27 of them can identify it. So it's a bit of a knowledge barrier for them too, that they probably don't know what it looks like, and they
Yeah.
haven't been given the education or resources to pick it up and then to deal with it, whether that's referring on to a psychologist as well. So it's not a matter of they don't want to know about it, they just don't know how to deal with it, which is a bigger systemic issue.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a very and the way that I learned about it when I was going through my recovery is it's very sneaky. It knows how to allow you to hide and to keep quiet and to do things just enough that people won't pick up on anything. My best advice that I ever got from my psychologist was that when you want to think about your eating disorder, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I always like to talk about it in like an external person.
Mhm.
It's because the way that I found that it was most helpful for me is that I think people wrap up their eating disorder in with themselves and they feel like it is them and it becomes them and it's harder to then let go. Whereas I had this amazing mindset from pretty much very early in my recovery is that it's an external entity. It's something that's not you. And I learned how to separate that from myself. So I tend to talk about it as an external thing. So that way then it's like something attacking you. It's something trying to hide the real you from everyone else. And it's trying to take you away from people. And it's trying to, be sneaky and be deceitful and things like that, which honestly really helped me because I think I don't like to think of myself as the same. Because for me, my eating disorder isn't me. It's something that happened to me and it's something that I got better from, but it'll never be me. So I don't hold on to that kind of sort of like that missing or that longing of it, which it can be hard. And there's been periods of times in recovery that I had gone through that. But by separating it from yourself, it no longer becomes you. And it's a lot easier to kind of move through recovery that way and have that mindset. But yeah, it can be sneaky and deceitful and it wants to take you away from the people that love you the most or the people that can help you. And so it does become very easy to if you're around friends or coaches and stuff, it's very easy to, lie and be deceitful and make sure that no one knows what's really going on with you.
I've just finished reading Kate Reid, the founder of Loon's book, Destination Moon, and she talks openly about her eating disorder and just how good at sort of lying you get, not in a negative way, but it makes you cover things up so well. And she talks about it that even to this day, it's always going to be a sort of this alter ego that's always there, and it's something that you just have to learn to kind of live with.
Yeah.
How have you felt that? Are you still managing it now, and what does that sort of look like for you?
I think on the days where it's hard, I definitely know that through some of my injuries, it's been a lot harder to deal with than others. And there's days where I feel like I'm on top of it and I'm managing it and eating sort of what, and I'm moving through life at a really nice pace. And then there's other times where I live in my head a little bit. It takes up a little bit more emotional and mental capacity than others, and it can be a little bit like daunting and shocking when that happens, when you feel more prominent in your mind. However, I think the best thing about recovery is that being open and honest is that you now have the tools to be able to speak up and speak out to a friend or family, or even just to yourself, and be honest and just be like, no, this isn't me. This isn't what I want. This isn't who I am. This isn't helpful. This thing isn't helping me. So through recovery, you learn how to manage the good days and you learn how to manage the bad days, and you learn how to move forward and not allow it to affect you. And some days are harder than others, but yeah, I think that I have now created such a beautiful support system that I don't feel the need to hide. And I honestly think by speaking up about it on my social media, it gave me almost an extra sense of freedom, because it actually pushed me further along in my recovery, I feel, because I no longer feel ashamed. I no longer feel this big, breath, because a lot of the time when people used to ask me, why did you move to Melbourne, or what was the reason behind that, or why did when my friends would ask me why I left my school in Sydney, a lot of time I lied. I wasn't willing to be open and honest about my journey, and I wasn't willing to say I needed to be closer to home and I needed to be closer to better eating disorder treatments. And so to be able to still try to pursue playing football and do what I love, I had to move. And it's not an easy thing to say, but I think by speaking up about it, on podcasts and through my own socials channels, is that it's helped push me further into recovery, because I actually know that by speaking up and being honest and being vulnerable, is that it's not a bad thing. It's helped more people than it's actually helped me. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it now.
Yeah, by putting a label on it and speaking out about it, it's almost like it gives you your voice, it gives you your power, and then you are doing something for more people than just yourself, which give you that sort of agency. So that's really cool. Another thing I do want to touch on though is that were you studying, or are you currently studying dietetics at the moment?
Yes, I
Yes.
am currently studying nutrition and dietetics. Yeah.
So tell me, how has that been, being in lecture theatres, being surrounded by food, chat talks about food and other things, when, you yourself have had a poor relationship with it? Is it all encompassing, all consuming, or do you find it almost empowering?
It took me a while to get to the point where I felt like I could go and study nutrition. I remember when I first was deciding what I wanted to do coming out of year 12, I had mentioned that I wanted to study nutrition. And my psychologist said, well, actually let's put a pause on that. She said that maybe it's not the best idea now, but if a couple of years you still feel that way, maybe you can go into dietetics, nutrition and dietetics. I then decided to apply for a double in PE teaching and exercise science. I then got asked to do a national team program in Sydney full time. So then I decided to go on a gap year. And then because of COVID, I went on another gap year. And then I came to the point where I wanted to go back to uni after my first ACL. And I remember sitting down with my parents and everything and just saying, I actually feel like I still want to do nutrition. And my reasons were not to learn about food for myself, it was to learn about how I can use my experiences to help others. So I think that's what I always keep in the back of my mind is, unfortunately, with eating disorders, my brain is like a calorie calculator. I can turn it on and I can turn it off. When I'm in a good space, it nulls. And when I'm in a bad space, unfortunately, I can tell you how many calories is in that slice of bread. It's not a healthy thing. And I understand and I know that. And it's not a good thing either. So I'm not trying to pretend that it is. So I don't need the degree to teach me about nutrition. And I've been in the high performance sports space enough to know how to feel my body and to understand the ins and outs of sports nutrition as well. And going through eating disorder recovery, there still is a focus on food, how much food you have to, to get in to make yourself healthy again, especially when you lose your period. But my goal from doing a nutrition degree isn't for myself. It's so that I can use my experience to help others that are going through the same thing I am, whether that be just younger adolescent girls trying to play sport, moving through life and have found themselves in the midst of an eating disorder, or, working in a high performance space where I can hopefully be that bridge between, you know, maybe that sounding board where they don't know who to go to and they don't know how to move forward. And then that way I can, give a professional hand in that sense. And I also want to work in eating disorder recovery centers and just use my experiences for good. So that's my kind of thought process behind wanting to be a dietitian. So yeah, it's less about me, more about what I can do for other people.
No, that's awesome. And I think when you are speaking to other people who are going through the same thing, there's this additional level of trust when someone's been through it themselves. So I think that's a beautiful bridge to have. You are doing a lot of other advocacy work around eating disorders. Tell us a little bit about the organizations you've been working with and what you're sort of planning on doing, in the upcoming future around this sort of stuff.
I am a part of a beautiful organization. It's called the Hide and Seek Foundation. Their founder, Jamie, she is also a lived experience advocate. And the goal of the organization is just to change the way that people speak around eating disorders, change the conversation. It's an education as well, sort of how to teach people to speak to those who have either gone through an eating disorder, who are coming to you about eating disorders, and is how we overall change the conversation. How we overall change the conversation. And she does such amazing work. She goes into schools. She wants to she's been starting to get into kind of professional clubs as well. And all it is that she just wants to make sure that those who are around those kind of higher risk populations understand, I guess, what eating disorders actually are, and then how to have a conversation and using the right language and creating the safe spaces around it. So I'm so grateful to be a part of an organization like that. It's definitely, I think, allowing me to put all that energy into a good place, and hopefully together we can create some change in that eating disorder space.
That sounds incredible, and it'd be awesome for, yeah, I guess the hide and seek too, work in more clubs and schools
Yeah.
at a young age and really set the scene so that we're sort of, capturing a lot of people that are falling through the cracks. And because as you say, it becomes a lifelong thing that you've got to deal with then. So if we can get it early enough, hopefully we can prevent a lot of young girls and boys from going through the same experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the one thing as well, is just understanding that it's not also girls, it's boys. Like, I have heard some horror stories about men's teams, and I'm sure when you work in a high performance space is that it gets around that I think sometimes men are treated just as worse as the girls when it comes to their weight and their performance. And I think in the men it's a little bit more cutthroat. I think people are realizing now that you can't kind of speak to women in a certain way and you can't treat women a certain way, where unfortunately I think men's sport can still sometimes slip through the cracks when it comes to how they can be treated. So they definitely, I think, a population that is misrepresentation. Sorry. misrepresented when it comes into the eating disorder conversation.
No, I totally agree. So, besides all of that, you are now your own founder of Style Tracker, and you are empowering women through building specific tracking software slash clothing for women, which is an incredible thing. And it's just really showing how the professionalism of women's sport is going, because we are so sick of wearing hand-me-downs from men. So please tell us a little
Yes.
bit about your little business and what you're planning to do with it.
Yes. So those who kind of play in a semi-professional, professional level sport, even if you just think of your everyday trackers, we especially in our space, and I remember even when I was 16, 17, we started getting GPSs brought into our clubs. And the only way you can wear your GPS is with a GPS vest. So it's not a GPS bra, it's a GPS vest that is a unisex design that was really made for men, because that's how male athletes are able to track their GPS data. Then with kind of the rise of women's sport, or we also not decided, but we also started, to that equal of professionalism. They also started to we also started to get GPSs. So, which is obviously a great thing. It's like the step in the right direction, what we want. However, the GPS vests that we got were always hand-me-down men's. They were 2 or 3 years old. They were flimsy. We never got the right sizes. I was very petite, and the small would never fit me. And then I was able to capture the data properly because of the fact that it was never tight to my body. The actual space was maybe like this big, and then when I would run, it would like flat. And honestly, for years, it was the same conversation walking into preseason. It was, oh my gosh, here we go again. Here are the hand-me-down ones. Who's got the extra small? Nope, there's only 3 extra smalls. Everyone's going to now wear medium, large, and extra large. Now we have to wear it over our shirt just to get it to fit. And it became a problem every year. And then at the start of last season, I honestly just went, why can we not get a sports bra that just has a GPS pouch in the back, and we just wear our bra and then we just slip it in and it's done, and out of sight, out of mind, and we can just go about our business. And then when I realized that it actually didn't really exist, I decided to take a leap of faith and create it myself. So I went through the manufacturing process and wanted to create this sports bra that not only is about women performance and comfort within the sports bra itself. So it can just be worn as a normal sports bra, but it allows us to be able to be comfortable in our skin while performing at our best when it comes to having to wear a GPS as well. We don't have to worry about whether or not our GPS vest fits. We don't have to whether or not it feels uncomfortable, whether or not now we're wearing 3 different layers on game day, whether or not it's too tight, whether or not it's too loose. It's meant to be a comfortable, high-performing piece of sports gear that is keeping up with the growth of our sport at the same time.
Love it. Such a brilliant idea and so necessary in women's sport. And I know we use those GPSs all the time. And now in our shirts, we've got a little clip in them. But when we're not wearing those shirts and you have to go back to the bras,
Yeah.
they suck and they stink because they're
Yes.
not washed, and it's just a nightmare. So thank you very much for solving that problem. Tell us a little bit now about who you're working with and what your sort of vision over the next 5 years is with Style Tracker.
So currently we are working with Try. We currently have an NPL team up in Brisbane also wearing our sports bras. We have a couple of partnerships in the work that I currently cannot talk about because
Ooh, watch
we're
this
just
space.
moving through them, but watch this space. But we're starting to start to work with a lot more high performance teams and a lot more high performance environments, which is really exciting. And it's exactly where I want the sports bra to be. And I think when you're so isolated within your sport, you don't realize how it affects people in other sports as well. But speaking to girls that have worn the bra that play other sports and have just, been like, this has been so helpful, like just wearing one bra. And yes, I guess maybe to the outside population, it might not seem like such a big deal, but when this is your life and when it's your environment every day, you want to feel comfortable and secure, and you don't want to feel like you're a second thought, or you don't want to feel like, oh, all right, here we go again. You just become an afterthought. And unfortunately, like when we wear the certain GPS vests at the club that I'm at, yes, they're there to capture the best data possible, but they're also made for men. So they're not made for the way that our bodies are. So it sits funny, and it sometimes it's super uncomfortable, and it can kind of play on your mind while you're performing. And that's not what a sports bra or even a GPS vest should be. It shouldn't hinder or affect performance, or it shouldn't be playing on your mind, or you should not put it on every day and be like, oh my gosh, here we go again. I'm so uncomfortable. Like, that's not how it should be. It's our women's space in sport is growing so heavily, is that everything else needs to catch up with it. And that's what I'm hoping that my product does, is helps meet the demands and the needs of high performance women's sport.
And there's so much study coming out now about how important a well-fitted bra is for performance and reducing injury. And we are never told how to, make sure your sports bra fits properly. Like, that's something you sort of do when you're a little bit older. But like, it should be going into clubs and teaching them the importance of this and how to understand if your bra fits well. But also, it should be part of equipment and kit, right?
Yeah.
Like, when we get our shirts and our shorts for our club, we should get a sports bra that fits. Like, it's basic equipment and it's basic protective gear. So it should just almost be the norm.
Yeah, it should be the norm, and it should always be that what we get is not second rate. It's not hand me down. It's not 3 years old. I think we're past that point now of women's sport being a second thought. And that's what I want. Is I don't want women in sport to have that feel like they are second thought, that my product is meant to be, yep, no, I put it on, I feel comfortable, I put in my GPS, I know I can go out there and train and perform and not have to worry about it again until I have to take it out.
I love it. Every club listening to this, please reach out to Chelsea and get it implemented in your club. Do us all a favor.
Yes, please.
So, wrapping up, we always finish on a couple of questions around women's sport, which has tied in nicely now. But knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell Chelsea, who was in that change room and crying about the way that she looked?
I would honestly tell her that, and I think this is the one thing that I like to harp on about on when I'm sharing my story, is that unfortunately there's always going to be this pressure on women in women's sport through the outside lens, but performance is way much more about the way that you look. Performance is how you show up every day. It's how you show up for yourself. I think for so long we've thought that our worth is in our body, but we're more than our bodies, and that you're so much more, and the way that you look is never going to determine, what people think about you. And just because, you might be 2 kilos leaner doesn't mean now you're going to perform 10 times better. That's not, unfortunately, how it works. And it's just to, trust in yourself, and that, I think as well that everything's going to be okay, and that, you're going to have the people around you, you're going to have that support system, and it might seem, you know, like the end of the world now, but you're actually going to take this experience and you're going to, turn it into such a positive.
Very, very important indeed. Now, for all the people listening today, so players, coaches, parents, what is something actionable they can all do today to help promote women's sport?
Honestly, I think the big thing for us is, knowing that we're fighting for full-time professionalism in my league, especially coming into next season, is that go down to your local women's sport, whether that be your A-League, your NPL, and go in and show your support for women's sport. Go and show that, you don't necessarily have to, be the world's #1 fan, but we're out here working every day, and we're doing it for our fans, and, come down and support us, and get around the women's game, because it's growing, and you want to be there for it, and just to continuously just share, even if it's just sharing, liking, anything, just getting around women's sport in general. But I definitely think one of the biggest things is come to our games, show us some support, and you definitely are going to be entertained.
Absolutely. The quality of women's sport is phenomenal. And I don't think I've heard many people that have gone in real life and watched it and said that they were disappointed by it, because it's just going from strength to strength. And the only way it's going to get even better is through more support, more bums in seats, and more funding. So that is the
Exactly.
best way to go about it.
Yes, exactly. You're never gonna be disappointed coming to a women's football game, I'll tell you that.
Put on a show for us. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for chatting with us today about this incredibly important topic and for all the advocacy that you're doing around it. Like, you are having a massive impact on the future generation, and you do it in such a brilliant way. And I'm really excited to see how Style Tracker goes. And I'm
Thank
excited to see it
you.
in every single club around Australia and around
Fingers
the world one day.
crossed.
We'll dream big.
Yes.
But where can listeners find you and Style Tracker?
On Instagram, at Chelsea Blissett, and then Style Tracker is just at Style Tracker on Instagram. Yep, that's where you can find us.
Excellent. Well, everyone, go and give it a follow. And if you've got something out of this episode today, which I know you all have, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, because as we've said, it is awareness that is going to help overcome a lot of these eating disorders and prevent many girls and boys from having to go through it themselves. Please follow and subscribe to 4TG. And if you can support, go on to Buy Me a Coffee so that we can keep this podcast alive and can keep having meaningful and powerful conversations like the one we have had today. Chelsea, thank you so much and best of luck with everything.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to 4TG, where the future of women's sport is being shaped, one story at a time. If today's episode hit home, subscribe, rate 5 stars, and send it to someone who needs that push. Stay in the loop at 4TG_podcast or on 4TG.com. We'll see you next time. Same mission, same movement. This one was for the girls.